1970 was a turning point in the life of John Lennon, marking both the end of an era and the beginning of a bold new chapter. In this video, we'll take a closer look at the key moments that shaped John Lennon's life during this transformative year. January 1970. Quiet start and planning new projects. John Lennon began 1970 in relative quiet at his home in Tittenhurst Park. After an intense few years with the Beatles, John was feeling drained, but he wasn't idle. January was spent reflecting on his future as he and Yoko discussed new artistic projects and their activism. February 1970. Primal Scream, Therapy and Personal Healing. In February, John and Yoko began primal scream therapy with Dr. Arthur Janov in London. Lennon had been carrying unresolved trauma from his childhood, and this form of therapy allowed him to confront these feelings head-on. The therapy would later heavily influence his music, especially his solo album. March 1970. Final days of the Beatles. Behind the scenes, the Beatles were already fractured. By March, John had privately informed the other members that he was done with the band. Though the official breakup wouldn't come until later, this month marked the end of their collaborative efforts. April 10, 1970, the Beatles break up. On April 10, 1970, Paul McCartney publicly announced that he was leaving the Beatles, shocking the world. However, John had already been ready to move on. Though he was upset by Paul being the one to make the announcement, John saw this as an opportunity to finally embark on his solo career without the constraints of the band. May 1970. Writing and recording for Plastic Ono Band. By May, Lennon was pouring his emotions into his music. He began writing the deeply personal tracks that would become John Lennon/Plastic Ono Band. Songs like Mother and Isolation were taking shape, reflecting the pain he had faced in both his personal and professional life. June 1970. Instant Karma tops the charts. In June, Lennon enjoyed the success of his solo single, Instant Karma, which had been released earlier in the year. It became one of the fastest recorded and released songs in pop history, climbing to number 3 in the UK charts. The song showcased Lennon's ability to thrive outside of the Beatles. July 1970. Retreat at Tittenhurst Park. July was a more relaxed month for Lennon. He spent time at Tittenhurst Park with Yoko, reflecting on his life's direction and enjoying moments of peace. It was a rare break for John, but his mind was always working, especially on his upcoming solo album. August 1970. Recording sessions intensify. By August, recording sessions for Plastic Ono Band were in full swing. Lennon worked closely with musicians like Ringo Starr and Klaus Voormann to craft the stripped-down, raw sound that defined the album. The emotional intensity of the songs reflected Lennon's journey through therapy and his recent break from the Beatles. September 1970, finishing Plastic Ono Band. By September, the finishing touches were being put on Plastic Ono Band. Lennon was uncompromising in his vision, wanting to strip away all the commercial sheen and deliver something raw and authentic. The album's production mirrored his emotional state, stripped down and exposed. October 1970. The Lennon-Ono activism continues. In October, Lennon's activism took center stage once again. He and Yoko continued their War is Over campaign, using their platform to call for an end to the Vietnam War. The couple placed billboards around the world with the now famous slogan, "War is over if you want it." November 1970. Preparing for release of Plastic Ono Band. As November rolled around, Lennon was preparing for the release of his debut solo album. The anticipation was high, but John knew the album wouldn't be easy for everyone to digest. It was a deeply personal project that bared his soul to the world. December 11th, 1970. Plastic Ono Band is released. On December 11th, 1970, John Lennon/Plastic Ono Band was released. The album was a stark departure from Lennon's work with the Beatles, marked by its brutal honesty and raw sound. Critics praised its emotional depth, though some fans found it difficult to reconcile this new, unfiltered version of Lennon. Songs like Working Class Hero and God explored themes of identity, disillusionment, and rebellion. Lennon's declaration, "I don't believe in Beatles," was a bold statement of his break from the past. December 31st, 1970, closing the year. As 1970 came to an end, John Lennon was a man transformed. The Beatles were behind him, and he was now a solo artist and a committed activist. He had broken free of the constraints of his past, and the world was seeing the real John Lennon, raw and unfiltered. 1970 was a year of endings and new beginnings for John Lennon. A year of personal evolution that would set the tone for the rest of his life. Subscribe to Rock Masterpieces for more deep dives into the lives of music legends.